During Daniel Hahn's tenure as the chief of the Roseville Police Department, crime rates for violent and property crimes hit a 20-year low, and Roseville was named 21st safest city in the nation. Now Chief Hahn is slated to become Sacramento's chief of police. Chief Hahn's record on strengthening the department's focus on neighborhood relationships and community policing has been a hallmark during his time in Roseville. Initiatives addressing mental health and homelessness have improved the quality of life for the city. Sharing what's working in Roseville, Chief Hahn and Roseville Police Department's Social Service Administrator, Bridgette Dean, join us next on Studio Sacramento.
At Five Star Bank, we create thoughtful solutions to help the Capital Region thrive, from economic development and education to public health and safety, issues that are vitally important to Sacramento's prosperity. We're proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
Chief, during a time when there seems to be so much mistrust between community and law enforcement, how does one rebuild that bridge between those that protect and the protected?
Well, I think the folks that are protected have to believe that the police department truly cares for them and has their best interests at heart. And that takes time, and it takes, in some cases, a different way of thinking in law enforcement.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, oftentimes in law enforcement, we get called on to arrest somebody and hold people accountable, but we often have to take a step or two farther than that, because what's best for our community is that these folks are whole and are good members of our community. So even if they go to jail for a couple weeks or a year, at some point they're coming back out. And if they come back out the same as they were or worse, that's not good for our community.
Bridgette, you're a social worker in a leadership position in a law enforcement department. It seems like those two things would be mutually exclusive. How does that work?
I think it works really well at the level of, the reality is that social work and law enforcement actually are very much in common with the populations that we serve and work with.
Really?
We tend to work with the at-risk individuals as social workers. We're CPS, we're your health and human service workers, we're your hospital care workers, we're your hospice workers. And so a parolee often receives a social work case management process. So we have a lot of things in common working with the same populations. I think it has been a journey of bringing those two worlds together to have us understand that we can help each other, we can speak each other's languages if we're willing to take the time to learn those languages and support the individuals we're working with. An individual who makes contact with law enforcement, as the chief just said, often needs additional services, and that's where social services comes in.
What inspired you to create this function within the Roseville Police Department in the first place?
I think throughout my career, I just see a revolving door. And oftentimes as police officers, I've done this myself, where you arrest somebody for some sort of crime, whether it's burglary or drugs or whatever it may be, and you take them to jail, and you know they're going to get out sooner or later, and you basically tell yourself, I'll just wait till they commit another crime because I know they are. And the problem with that is if that's what we're waiting for, more victims are in their wake, and we don't want more victims in our community. So if
I don't usually hear that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reality. We don't really think of it typically that way, but that is, if you're arresting them for something, there's another victim there that's now scared to stay in their house or whatever it may be. And so if we can help them along their path of getting healthier and not committing these things that damage our community, like, for example, most burglaries are done by people with drug issues. So if we can help them with their drug issues and whatever caused them to be on drugs, then they're not going to be breaking into people's house, and we're not going to have to keep arresting them, because clearly that doesn't work.
It sounds so logical as you stated, but this approach is unusual, at least in the standpoint of in California, through the last part of the century, we talked about let's lock people up, let's hold them as long as possible until they're too old to be able to offend again, and let's not try to rehabilitate. This seems completely in a different direction.
Yeah, I think what's unique about our approach is it's very comprehensive. So I think you'll find little bits and pieces throughout the country of a little bit of this here and a little bit of that there, but this is really comprehensive. And you know, the old approach, there is some benefit to taking somebody to jail, and I mean, there's some people that are very dangerous, and then there's also not any crime being committed when they're in jail. But at some point, they're coming back out. And if they come back out worse and still have the same issues, can't get a job, can't get an education, all these things add up, they're still on drugs, oftentimes they're still on drugs while they're locked up, then our community suffers as soon as they get out. And their families and our families all suffer. So it's in our best interest to try to help people be productive members of our community.
Well, and I think that the other thing that's really important with the law enforcement social work connection is we can become a prevention in addition to an intervention, and we don't have to have that long-term.
Explain the distinction
chaos.
between the two.
When we start building community, you know, when you have a community relationship as a law enforcement agency, you start getting to know the individuals who live in your beat or your neighborhood or your population. When we talk about homelessness, that is its own community in a sense within a community. And when you start building those relationships and you have rapport and trust built, then you can start working on those issues that before they arise to the level of a police officer coming and having to arrest to begin with. Whether it's, you know, I worked in schools for years, so whether it's working with a youth as they're starting their drug use and we're intervening at that point. You know, we do the prevention piece where we teach kids say no to drugs. And ultimately, if there comes a point where they start using drugs, then we give the intervention piece of how do we prevent you from getting further down the line. And that's really a big piece of what this unit and what the chief has brought into Roseville is how do we prevent the long-term cost to the community for future victims and frankly future chaos and instability for the individual who's suffering the mental illness, the drug addictions, and the homelessness.
How does that type of intervention or prevention work when you're dealing with homelessness?
Homelessness is an interesting issue that I think we all are dealing with, and you know we often talk about it from a community level or you know it's in my neighborhood or a state level, but in reality, homelessness is a national issue right now. And I've traveled all over. I speak at different agencies and different events, and it doesn't matter where I travel to. There's a homeless issue in that city. And I went to Hawaii recently, even and told the chief, you know, one of the first things I did was went down and visited a homeless camp because I was curious how is that impacting the islands. And so we have it everywhere. I think what we have to do is in homelessness, we have to really, really start approaching it from a collaborative community model. And as communities, as social workers, we come from a very ecological collaborative background. That's what we're trained to do. The thing about collaboration is it doesn't always get brought to its full fruition. And so what happens is you have many collaborations, you know, small collaborations, but that large comprehensive collaboration, getting everybody to the table, doesn't always happen. And I think that's been one of our big successes in Roseville, is that process of we're all coming to the table together, we're all going to start working together, and we're all going to start discussing what's best and how to resolve the issues around homelessness.
In hearing Bridgette describe that process, it brings to mind training. What had to change about the way that the members of the force in Roseville approach their job in order to really leverage the benefits of the program that Bridgette is describing?
Well, I would say it's an ever-evolving process. So we're constantly working on that because it's really, in certain ways, a change of mindset for a police officer. And so really, to me, the best way to convince officers and convince the department and law enforcement is through the successes of that, whatever it is you're doing. So for example, the mental health services have declined over the last decades, the funding and things. What I used to do with people with mental health problems as a patrol officer doesn't exist anymore. We can't do that anymore. And so the help that they have and receive is not as much as it used to be. So when things play themselves out on the street, somebody in mental health crisis, a homeless person, drugs, or all of them combined, who do people call? They call 911. And so a police officer responds, not a social worker, not any of those. So we have to, no matter how many social workers, no matter how well it's funded, the police officer is typically the entry way. And you have two issues. One, the initial response, that's a critical incident going on. And then two, what follow-up connections does that police officer have to get this person the help, long-term help that they need? And so when police officers see that being successful and they're not on the 6 o'clock news because something bad happened and something bad period didn't happen, then that's when they start buying in and believing that regardless of what I originally thought about this, this is working out pretty good.
And I think the other thing officers see when you start having those results of showing that the programs are working is there's reduced recidivism. We're not rearresting the same person or even calls for service to the same location over and over and over, because we've plugged those people into different resources and services to support them, to get them up and out. And that's really our goal in social services as well, and working with our officers on the team. It's, you know, training them to not only approach it as a law enforcement individual, which they are, and they are an officer first when they come on scene, and that's important. You know, we couldn't do this without our police officers, and we have a great group of officers working with us. But once they resolve the criminal side of that, it's also time for them to say, okay, what do I do next? What is next for this individual so that I'm not coming out again, or that we're not coming out for a worse situation, or the family's not continuing to suffer, or there's not additional victims. And that's the essential part of the training, is knowing who to call.
How do you measure success of these types of programs?
Well, I think the first measure is people are safer. So, I mean, it is not unusual and extremely frustrating because officers, we had a couple cases in Roseville where there's 30 calls to a person's house because they have mental health issues over and over. And so as the officers leave that house after each call, they say to themselves, this guy has major issues and he's going to hurt somebody, or we're going to have to shoot or hurt him. And they leave frustrated because they don't want to do that, but they're like, what else is there for me to do? The neighbors are saying the same thing. I don't let my kids play outside because this guy's going to hurt them. And so it just seems like if there's something else we can do so the inevitable doesn't happen, let's do that. And so that's what this is really about, is how do we prevent our officers from coming into, 3 or 4 feet apart from somebody in a mental health crisis with a weapon, a knife, because then it's too late. So we do everything we can to prevent our officers ever from getting in that situation. And so everybody's healthier. The officer's healthier, the individual's healthier, the community's healthier, the family's healthier, and we don't have all this angst in our community.
Well, speaking of angst in the community, let's take a step back and talk about the angst that's going on in many communities across the country, with the level of not only violence against individuals, where people, particularly people of color, have been killed in interactions with police, but at the same time, there are police officers who have been killed in the line of duty where people have just gone out and assassinated them. And so it seems like that there's danger on both sides of the equation.
Sure.
But there should only be one side, which is the community side. How do we get there?
Well, I think we all have to get together and first of all, be honest with each other. This issue that you just spoke about has been in our country since its inception. There has never been a time in our country that every segment of our community trusts and believes in law enforcement. Never. I mean, these same things we deal with today were happening in cities across our country in the late 1800s. The exact same scenarios where certain segments of our community don't have the same job opportunities, school opportunities, feel like they're not valued the same as other neighborhoods, and then some police action takes place, and then now there's a riot. So, to me, it's about time we try to really, truly tackle that issue for real, instead of putting window dressing on it. And the first thing is, every community has to believe that police officer and that police department truly cares about them, not that other neighborhood, but not us. So that takes time, and that takes relationship. That takes us being there every single day, in the good times and the bad times, and people truly believing that we actually care about their well-being. And you have to consciously do that. And if you don't, you have the same issue that we have now.
And I think that's so crucial to that, going back to that relationship building piece. You can have a community officer who drives his beat every day and gets out and talks to 1 or 2 people. Or you can have the community officer who gets out of his car and really gets to know the individuals he's working with. And it was interesting, I was talking to our POP officer, Officer O'Rourke today.
POP,
problem-oriented policing. So his job is to kind of look at it from the bigger perspective and try to find solutions for bigger issues in a community. And he said to me, the one thing I've realized in this position in the 9 months that this unit has been here is that that relationship building that I've put the time and energy into has allowed me to actually provide services sooner, reduce the need to call 911 at all, and has actually bettered the life of the individuals that I'm working with. And that, for an officer to sit back and say, I'm really making a difference by building that relationship first, is the switch that we need to flip.
I wonder whether or not it also improves the safety of the officer working in that community.
Absolutely.
It absolutely does. It's not only improves
Absolutely.
their physical safety in what you're talking about, but really their job satisfaction, their morale. I mean, when you have a community that both the police department is supportive of the community and the community is supportive of the police department, and you have that great relationship, everybody is not only physically healthier, but they just enjoy being at work. They get more out of it. That is the reality.
Well, and I think that those relationships also allow you to have those tough discussions the chief was mentioning earlier, because you have built that circle of trust, for lack of a better word, with the officer and the community. And so, I go out with our officers on a regular basis and spend a day out with them. And it's not uncommon for individuals to come up and very openly share their concerns about the neighborhood, law enforcement, maybe something the city council has passed or didn't pass, the park, whatever the situation is, the kids in the neighborhood. And sometimes those are passionate discussions for them because it's their community. It's their community and their homes and their families being impacted. And the fact that they feel comfortable enough to walk up to a uniformed individual and say, hey, can you talk to me about this today? I'm struggling with it, is a big deal to me. And I think it's something that we've really done well.
What have you learned as a social worker about the work of policing and how interactions with the community takes place that you didn't know before you were doing this job?
Interestingly enough, I ran a continuation high school for many years in Roseville, and the school officer was so essential to us in that, that population of high-risk individuals who had been, they're disenfranchised. They've had a system that has not stepped up for them. And when that continually happens to individuals, the lack of trust is absolutely there. And that community, you build that community relationship even on a school campus with that school officer. And so I really thought, coming into this position, that it would be in some ways very similar, and it has in some ways. What I have learned the most about this process is there's a sergeant who often tells people that I'm bilingual. And he says she speaks law enforcement and she speaks social work. And I think the one thing I have found is how essential it is that we are speaking each other's languages. And the difference when you walk through the door as a social worker and a police officer, the discussion instantly changes.
Really? How so?
Because right away it's not about I'm the cop coming in to deal with this. It's I'm the officer coming in to help you with your situation. And I'm there with the resources available, or to have that discussion off to the side with them that maybe they're not completely comfortable right then having with the officer, or working with the individual who might be just in the beginning of some of their mental health issues, who haven't been adhering to medication, or the simplicity of a 15-year-old out of control. And so what that does often is allow the individuals to have that second person to connect to, and even as a buffer between each other, the officer and I can be for that individual. And that's just I think a comforting sense for them. And I have found it just to be really interesting to me walking into whether it's a social work, bringing my officers into a meeting full of social workers is always interesting, because officers tend to think social workers are going to hug everybody, we're going to give you a gold star, we're going to pat you on the head and tell you it's all good. And social workers tend to think every officer's here to arrest everybody and they don't care about anybody. And neither of those are true. We're actually very similar in what we're doing. We respond typically to the 911 call, and then our job is to help you navigate through that process. Now, sometimes the difference is the officer may take you to jail, but sometimes the difference is the officer may direct you to the social services unit that gets you the resources you need so that you never go to jail to begin with.
In instituting this type of program, what surprised you as an outcome that you didn't realize was going to take place when you were first conceiving it?
Well, I don't know that it surprised me. I think maybe how quick it happened and at what level it happened surprised me a little bit. But we've handled some calls involving people in mental health crisis that are very similar to ones you've seen on the news. and you haven't seen them on the news because the officers have responded in the way that we've talked about and the way we've trained, and nobody was injured. And so how quick that happened, you know, at times when you're implementing new things, you get a little frustrated because it's not going as fast or you don't think it's working, and then you have a call like that where everybody did exactly what they should have done under those circumstances, and everybody's alive and healthy to live another day, and then it renews your faith, because what you hope people would do and improvise on a particular call, they do that, and everybody's okay. So I would say to the level and how quickly we saw that happen was a little bit of a surprise.
It almost sounds like there's a theme that both of you are speaking to that's underneath your comments about training. It seems that there's one, resource availability, but the other one, it sounds like that there is a big training opportunity.
Yeah, I think there's training in both ways. The initial handling of the call, that means let's make this safe, where maybe somebody has a weapon or whatever, and you need to make the community safe for everybody. That's one part of it. And then the follow-up. So cops aren't always the best at doing social work, but we can be the best at getting people connected to people like Bridgette and other folks like that. So yeah, there's a lot of training involved.
As you continue to build on this program and move it forward, what's the next big opportunity that you think needs to be looked at?
I've always been really open with the chief about long-term goals. I mean, I set out with this unit to create a comprehensive social services plan for the city of Roseville, so that regardless of who you are in the city of Roseville, and we're talking about homelessness and the mentally ill, but the reality is an elderly individual, we address a lot of those issues as well. And so it's to get everybody plugged into the services and resources they need to have a quality of life that's acceptable or even beyond that, right? Ultimately, we're moving right now. Our next big project is our mental health task force, which is rolling out, and that's going to be, I'm excited about that. What we've done is we've created a threat assessment mental health team, and I want to clarify, we're using a lot of language here that may imply to some that everybody with mental illness is a threat, and that's not what I'm trying to say. But there are individuals who have a higher risk of that officer-involved shooting or harming somebody else that we do need to take attention to. So this unit is great in the sense that it's a combination of officers being trained specifically in mental health arena. And they are being trained on various mental health areas, including, they're not diagnosing, that's not their job. They're not social workers, technically, that's not their job. But they do have an understanding of key symptoms of schizophrenia or bipolar illness or some of those other things that they can address, and bringing that into patrol so that we have an officer on every shift.
So in your new assignment, should we expect to see a lot of what we talked about today being deployed?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. So Sacramento already has some of these pieces, but anything, and every community is different, every department's different, but yes, anything, I think it's very clear. All you have to do is watch the news at night and say that it's very clear that we need to be as good as we possibly can with dealing with mental health issues in our community, because again, the police officer is the one that's called. And then homelessness is a growing issue that no matter where you go, you're going to find that, which also includes oftentimes mental health, drug issues, and just the whole changes in the criminal justice system have placed some of those issues more prominent in our community. So we have to get better at dealing with those things so people are healthy.
And you're returning to Sacramento, and as a African-American man raised in Oak Park, what is it that you bring to the table in terms of your worldview that you're most excited about in leading this police force in this era of Sacramento's history?
Well, probably the most important thing you said there is I was raised in Oak Park. So clearly that's the best community in this country. So
some would say South Sacramento is, but we'll talk about that later.
I think we're all a product of our experiences, and so I think it gives me a unique set of experiences to come back to Sacramento after having been trained basically in Roseville, And I do believe that every neighborhood in Sacramento can work together and have a large amount of trust in the police department. But we have to work at that. We got some work to do in that area. But I absolutely believe it's possible. I've actually seen it. So that's what I believe in, and I think we can get that done.
And have you gone back to Oak Park and talked to some of the residents back there since the announcement was made?
I have not done that. I go to Oak Park fairly regularly, but I have not been there since the announcement was made.
All right. Well, we look forward to seeing more of you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Chief.
Thank you.
And that's our show. Thanks to our guests and thanks to you for watching Studio Sacramento. I'm Scott Syphax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
At Five Star Bank, we create thoughtful solutions to help the Capital Region thrive, from economic development and education to public health and safety, issues that are vitally important to Sacramento's prosperity. We're proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at kvie.org/video.